Hello everyone, welcome back to Rule the Roost podcast. It's outside of the regular scheduled Monday podcasts here, but you know, it's a weird month, isn't it? October, loads of games. And I felt like the Manchester United game in particular needed its own little breakdown. A breakdown of the breakdown is what I was supposed to say. So, who better to get on again, as we've established, my fellow on the fence, happy clapper, bit modern football, bit gammon, brother, Jon Bass. How you doing, mate?
Good, mate. Good. Yeah, I was just listening to your intro then. I was thinking, basically I'm like half stats when they suit me. Half football opinions when they suit me. You know, just kind of trying to find a middle ground that makes sense to me and no one else.
When there's that player you don't like, it's like only 60% pass completion. When it's
Exactly.
a player you like, 62% pass completion. I mean, that's above average, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's like, well, it doesn't matter about the stats, does it? Just, you know, think about how they make you feel. That's what's important.
That's it.
Until they make you feel like a prick, and
then it's eye test all the way,
Exactly.
like proper blokes. We got called negative last time, which do you know what? I want to have your feelings on this, mate, because I felt that was unfair. I don't think our last pod was negative. Did you?
No, I spent basically, I felt like a politician. The next kind of pod appearance I was on was the Fighting Cock, and I kind of felt like, right, I just need to basically re-establish my point I was trying to make, which might have come across negative to some people because, let's be honest, the things we were saying weren't positive, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all negative. I think we're just trying to find balance to the argument. By being completely blindly positive is also quite a negative thing. So I think, and I felt, and I feel that basically these days, if you're just balanced, you're considered negative, which is a shame.
I did not have sexual relations with negativity.
Exactly.
I just had a conversation at a bar with negativity. That's it, right? That's kind of in that framing of a politician. That's where you're at, right?
Very, very much so. Yeah, the Monica Lewinsky of opinions is where we were at.
I'll put my cigars away then.
Call me Jonica Lewinsky, if you will.
It's thrown me a bit, that, mate. I'm kind of getting images of you now squeezed into like a little black dress, you know, with suspicious stains all over it.
Yeah.
God, what a hell of a time to be alive that was, man. Right? You know, all this stuff, like British politics has some wally like Liz Truss come in for a couple of weeks and walk out, and we make out like it's some big national thing when, what is it, just 15, 20 years ago, you got Bill Clinton getting sucked off by someone else in the Oval Office. It's mad. Pretty mad. Pretty wild.
It's mad times. We've gone from Watergate scandals and Monica Lewinsky scandals to a lettuce outliving the Prime Minister. And people are like, this is the worst politics there's ever been. Is it? Or is it the stupidest it's ever been?
It's just bizarre, isn't it? It's literally beyond parody now. But let's stick to the football, yeah, mate. Let's stick to the football. Fuck Manchester United. Fuck that game.
Yeah.
I wasn't particularly angry about it, mate. I was disappointed, obviously, but I just didn't want it to fall into that old I wasn't angry, I was just disappointed cliche. But I felt like it just fucking was a kick in the bollocks, you know? I really felt deflated after that.
Yeah. Do you know what, mate? I actually, going back to, you know, after the last pod we did, I was pretty down. I think I was pretty down on the way that we play. And I think we spoke about these kind of automations that Conte's supposed to play that you and I hadn't really seen them. And after we had that pod, the games that we had, Frankfurt and Everton, I was actually really positive after those two games. I was like, okay, maybe I've been a bit too hasty here. Particularly Everton. I thought Everton was a great performance. I really enjoyed watching that game for the first time this season, where it was a game that I really saw what we were trying to do and actually kind of got for the first time a bit of an insight into, okay, this is what happens when you kind of follow what he's trying to do. So I was going into this game super, super positive, which is generally my position. I would say I'm very much like happy clappy towards Spurs and blindly optimistic and a bit of a dreamer, which I think you mentioned on your pod directly after the game. That is my default position, and is going into the game on Sunday against Newcastle. I'm still kind of like, oh yeah, we'll be fine, we'll get back to it. So that's what I think made this even more of a kick in the teeth. For me, was that I'd kind of been like ready to be hurt again, and I was.
Do you think it's a mentality thing? man, because I've obviously seen lots of people throw stuff around. It's the system. It's Conte playing too conservatively in these games. It's the same load of players that have failed consistently. Which, do you know what? I buy less and less now. Really, like the only players there are what Dyer, Son, Kane, really like, and Lloris at like the heart of, I suppose Ben Davies as well, at the heart of like these successive kind of nearly men teams. So I think like to keep sort of defaulting back to, oh, it's Daniel Levy's fault, it's Enix's fault. Well, I mean, we're spending a lot of money now, really. You know, we're not Manchester City, we're not PSG. So I don't know what people are expecting. We're not going to be signing Haaland or Mbappe, are we? That's just the reality of it, and people just need to come to terms with that. Until we get bought out, if we get bought out, we're not going to buy players like that. So I think Tottenham are starting to spend pretty well now within sort of our means. There's been a lot of talk saying that he's going to get given £200 million, but he touched on that the club, the players, there needs to be a shift in mentality, because when we get to these big games, we crumble. And it is triggering. Like it wound me up after when I saw him say it, and I thought, well, it's true though. Like he's only saying shit I've been banging on about on here for the past couple of years, in that it's all well and good when Spurs can kind of turn up against Everton or even Brighton away, which it was a good result. I'm not going to take anything away from it, but it wasn't like a big game, you know. But we've seen over these past few years, when we were top of the table with Jose and people started to say maybe Tottenham are a team here, we crumbled at the first time when we got that Liverpool game. You know, Liverpool on the down a little bit, they still managed to turn us. I think going into that game, they hadn't scored for like fucking 4 or 5 games. I think they'd lost about 6 in a row, something mad like that. But we still kind of fell down. So do you think we do have a mentality issue in these games, or because I mean, you know, the peek behind the curtain for everybody, we were talking on WhatsApp about how teams of this size approach a game against Tottenham, because it seems like they always show up against us, right? United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal, all of them. Tottenham is always a game for all of these clubs, right?
Even clubs lower down the league. I mean, the thing that sort of triggered me off on that, saying that was, and I don't know if other people noticed this, maybe it's just my own insecurity, but Casemiro was literally on his knees like he'd won the World Cup when it went 2-0 up. I don't see players do that against like other teams, not even some of the big games, like outside of maybe Liverpool and City. If United would go 2-0 up, would you see that response from him? But it seems weird. It does seem like these teams like have an extra level of care against us, and maybe that's just being like, oh, woe is me, woe is Tottenham kind of thing. I don't know. But yeah, I think with the mentality thing, I think there must be something in it, right? Because all the evidence points to the fact that we haven't been able to get something over the line. So it's almost remiss of me to be like, no, it's not a mentality problem. It must be to a certain extent, right? We've got players who've done things individually, and even the team have performed in spells really well, right? You mentioned there when we were under Mourinho and we were sort of top of the league at a certain point. We've had, you know, players score like a bucket load of goals. We've had, you know, points over calendar years that would have like won us leagues in any other kind of decade. All this kind of mad statistics, but for whatever reason we haven't been able to actually get something over the line. So there is definitely something there. But I also think that the last couple of managers we've had, so like Jose, Nuno, and now Conte, they set themselves up in a way which is a back foot approach. It's the other team have got to do something to beat us rather than we're going to do something to beat them. And I do think that leaves you exposed from a mentality point of view of when it goes wrong, it's really hard to then come back from that point. Whereas I think under, say, Poch, and I'll use it as an example because we ended up losing and not getting what we wanted, but it felt better, was the Battle of the Bridge. We went out fighting. We went out on our sword, basically, trying to do something. And when things were going wrong, the players were still, I think, like the mentality was still like, fuck this, like we're not going to just let this go. I just saw abject, like, defeat, basically, in the players' body language and attitude. And even in Conte's attitude, if you look at the Arsenal game, just made changes so we didn't get battered, not changes to get back in the game. I'm looking at when we're we're 2-0 down against Man United with 30 minutes to go, thinking we can get something. That's how I'm thinking about it, because I'm looking at it thinking we can do that. We have the players capable of doing it that are even on the pitch. You make a couple of changes. Sometimes it's just an injection of a player. Even a player like Brian Hill, who's done really nothing in a Spurs shirt, he might just go on a run and just dink one in, or just score, or just do something, or get a penalty, or get a free kick, something. But the mentality is, well, let's just make defensive substitutions so we don't concede more goals. That pragmatic mentality, I think, breeds fear in players. And maybe it doesn't in Italian players who are used to pragmatic football. That is their way they play. But I think there's something in that we've created this mentality of fear of you can't make a mistake. And as soon as we do, we just blow up and go to bits. And most of the games we play in, the opposition, and we've seen that, right? We've picked up it's been our best start to a season in terms of points collected. Against most teams, that'll work because we've got better players and we do a job. But when it really matters, I think it's an issue that we're going to face time and time again because we play defensive negative football and we're going to get defensive negative results. And just quickly on this point, mate, I think I've seen the stats around, well, no team has won any points away from home against the other top six. Fine, but when someone does, they'll probably win the league. And if we want to win things, we have to break that. Otherwise, it's just status quo. And that, to me, is also a bit of an issue. So, yeah, I think it is a bit mentality, but it was also down to the mentalities being created by the way that we're being coached to play.
Rocking all over the world, mate. That's all I'm thinking of now.
Exactly.
And I like it, I like it. You remember the dancing they used to do on stage where they're like swinging their guitars about and
in sync? Yeah, it's perfect, mate. I'm actually doing it now, just on my own. Yeah.
I've actually seen. I saw them live once. When you kind of, I think it was Bestival. I saw them. They were like on in the middle of the day. Do you know what I mean? I thought, oh, go on then, fucking, let's go. Yeah. Let's go watch Status Quo. A few bangers, but everyone's there just to watch, like, fucking rocking all over the world, aren't they? Shaking inflatable guitars about. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the shots conceded thing because I think it's something like only Leicester and Forest have had more shots conceded than we have this year. Which, I mean, it's one of those things where. This is to our conversation at the start where you're sort of blending stats and the eye test. I do think that's one of those stats that is kind of misleading, I think, because I would say from having watched us week in, week out, you can see that we are conceding shots, but we're conceding shots from players just hitting and hoping because we've been so well set up that they just can't break through there. Quality opportunities are limited, so they're just sort of twatting one from wherever. We've seen that happen quite a lot. I think the more damning one for me is, I think it's the 68 shots we've conceded to get away against Arsenal, United and Chelsea this season, which, I mean, even that though, I say that, I don't really remember Arsenal or Chelsea creating that many quality opportunities in those games either. The United game is definitely the aberration there to me because they had several really, and if Lloris hadn't been, other than his butterfingered moment at the start of the game, if he hadn't have been on song, I think we would have conceded quite a few more. I mean, that's not really a big take, is it? Goalkeeper performs well, so we don't concede more goals. Well done, Jack. Fucking hell, state of it. Mate, it's just when it's not, and I realise like how much I yo-yo on this, but when it's bad, it's really fucking bad, isn't it? Like watching this, because it sounds ridiculous to say, but last year I was fucking raging. I was so annoyed when we lost to the Ronaldo hat-trick, but we still scored a couple. We had a proper good fight there, and he had a worse team at that point. It just feels like this year he's like... Remember how Mourinho changed after we drew 3-3 with West Ham? 3-0 up, and then we went to 3-3. And it just seemed from that point on, Mourinho was just like, no, just defend and long ball. And that was it. It almost feels like Conte's gone into this season being like, right, well, I haven't managed to get all of the players I wanted to get in the summer. So what I'm going to do is just kind of set up really, really defensively. I don't know if he felt like he had less to lose at the tail end of last year. He was picking up a club halfway through a season. He was very eager to be like, this isn't really my problem. Like, the state of this club, I've never really, whatever. I'll try and do what I can. But it feels like it's more, maybe that it's more on him now. It just seems really different, right? This year.
Yeah, I think so, because I think when I was talking about my frustrations in terms of playing style, I always get reminded of, but don't you think the last sort of 10 games of last season were really good? And I'm like, yeah, they were really good, but I'm not seeing that the first few games of this season. That's probably my issue, is the style of football we were getting end of last year was for me anyway, was like a tolerable level. It was like pretty good. Like, we were trying to take possession, we were like playing in a way where I could see what we were trying to do. But this year I haven't really seen it. But the results have been the same. Like, we've been picking up in the majority wins, and we've put ourselves in a pretty good position. In fact, a really good position. It's our best ever start to a Premier League. So it is really hard to argue with the outcome of what he's trying to do. It's just more, for me, it's just the approach it does seem different. I mean, even things like the kind of reliance on Royale. Like, when we were really doing well and Doherty was playing pretty well, again, I was like kind of enjoying that. And up until Doherty got injured, you could really see there was some progression in the player, and also just the way we were playing, because he is, more forward thinking than Royale. But he's just stuck with Royale this season. Like, and I know Doherty's been coming back, and I've wanted to see Spence from the beginning, and for whatever reason he doesn't feel he's ready, which again, he sees him every day in training, fair enough. But I just feel like, you're right, last season, if we'd have for whatever reason just had Spence join sort of midway through him being there, I think he'd have played more. Whereas this season, I feel like there is definitely some reservation, and there's definitely reservation with making subs and using players throughout the squad that we've got there. And I think that is costing us. People are talking about player fitness in this game, and we look tired. And I sort of, like, part of me gets it, but part of me looks at other clubs and I just think they don't rotate, really. Like, De Bruyne plays every minute for City, he always has done. And, like, I don't think he's tired, 8-10 games into the season, wherever we are now. And again, I know that the running stats, we're the highest and we run the furthest and all this stuff. But then I hear, maybe he's playing this way to reserve the players' legs because of the World Cup. Well, they can't run the most distance and be reserving themselves for...
No.
Well, it doesn't make sense. So I'm just a little bit lost, and maybe there's a little bit that with him. He doesn't know whether to stick or twist a little bit now. Maybe that's what we're seeing, because when we went 2-0 down, just nothing happened. Nothing happened. And it was... One thing I do agree with Conte in is that there isn't enough depth in the squad. He doesn't have enough options to do things with. But he does have options. He just doesn't want to use them. And that was the bit that really was the most frustrating thing for me of all, was like, you have a game plan. We're all on board with it. It's picked up points this season. When it doesn't go right, though, nothing changes. We saw that at Arsenal, and now we've seen it against United. And that's the thing that my main criticism of what he's doing in game is, like, he's not doing anything in game, and that does worry me, if I'm honest.
It's funny, isn't it? Because you wonder if things can be this sort of base, if they can be this binary. But I think one of the glaring things is, despite all this conversation we're having, one of the most sort of obvious Occam's razor type points is we just don't have Kulusevski. Yeah. And the tail end of last year, when we were absolutely flying, he was flying. And for whatever reason, inexplicably, the start... I mean, it seems mad now that we don't have him available to us. It seems almost criminal that Conte wasn't starting him, like, from the beginning of the season, every single game. Because it just seems like one of the biggest things we're missing now is somebody to be able to... I mean, Højbjerg gives it his best shot, right? I think his passing is decent. But the way in which Kulusevski can sort of pick the ball up and just drive into the opposition half and create something as well. Create something consistently, like those whip crosses he puts in, and just the fact he's a goal threat himself. I mean, I've said this before, but dare I say he's almost like one of our most important, if not our most important players nowadays. And it just seems like... it seems like we're sort of playing with, like, we're fighting with one arm tied behind our back type thing, at the moment, because I don't know, United was a horror show, right? I thought United was just totally awful, But even in games like the Everton game, we were good. But I'm watching that and I'm thinking we can still be better than that, though. I've still seen us play better than that, and it just feels like it's missing him. And there seems to be it seems to be Tottenham doing another Tottenham, doesn't it? That we're not really being that forthcoming in how long he's going to be out for, what's actually wrong with him. And probably, it's one of those things, we're probably just sensitive to it because we see our own club doing it. I'm sure most clubs are probably like that. They're probably not all openly kind of publicising how affected their players are, how long they're going to be out for, because I would imagine, like a lot of the time, people's bodies are just different. People have different recovery times, and it's probably hard to say, right? I don't know. You've touched there, John, on the squad depth or lack thereof. Where do you stand on? Because it's such a polarising topic, right? We've done Conte. Let's go on to ENIC. Let's go on to Daniel Levy. Yeah. Where do you stand on him? Because again, like I am with a lot of things, I do often sit on the fence with them. I've had times when I've really, prioritising building the stadium, not backing Pochettino when I thought we had probably the best chance to win the lot we've ever had. I had zero time for them. I was so pissed off. But I think from that point to now, the stadium has been delivered, and I feel like we're starting to sort of reap the benefits of it. I am seeing tangible investment going into the club, right? We're buying players like Richarlison. We're probably giving somebody like Perisic, you'd imagine, 100 grand, 150 grand a week to come and play for us, bringing that experience. They're breaking kind of the model that we've been used to or has been associated with Tottenham, with ENIC, and their kind of long-term speculation, buying young players with a view to selling them on. I still see commentators and pundits and even Spurs fans saying that that's what ENIC do, and I don't see that anymore. I don't, the days of us selling Carrick and that sort of thing, to me it seems way behind us now. Kyle Walker, people bring up, but Kyle Walker wanted to go. Him and Pochettino clearly fell out. I think it was a different sort of circumstance. Selling to Manchester City was probably a bit of a misstep, but is what it is. But I mean, I see us as a club that we are starting to speculate now. We are putting money into it. And I just feel that people are kind of getting too warped by, like I say, the sort of money that is available to clubs like Manchester City, even Manchester United a bit further down the ladder than that. But still, they've got a few quid, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think as football fans, the only way you are 100% happy with your owners if they just spend relentlessly. And there's only a handful of clubs who are able to do that, and they have very questionable ownership, let's say, in terms of their sort of moral efficacy of their ownership. So for everyone else, you're kind of looking at like short-term things. And I was exactly the same. There was, times under Redknapp, the Zaha and Nelson window, right? Where it's like we're actually in a really good position, spend some money, speculate a little bit, maybe we could do something. We don't. It doesn't go the way we want. Fair enough. Under Pochettino, that team, those sort of back-to-back seasons of doing really good stuff, it's like just invest now and really back this team. That's what you want as a football fan. But when you're looking at the bigger picture and you're looking at what was going on around that time, it's like we were building we're spending billions of pounds on building a stadium to try and give like longevity to the success and to give a platform to hopefully build success for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So we look at things very season to season, like just spend it now, do it now, now's the time. They're planning over decades. They're looking at things over 10 years. And if you look at it through that prism, you look at it through when they came in to where we are now, it has been net good, hasn't it? Like they've improved the club in basically every aspect except the one that the fans really want and what all this stuff is building towards, which is success on the pitch, trophies, and something that comes out of that. But again, it's the same sort of thing. I think we spoke about it on the last pod I was on, which is, does an FA Cup or a League Cup or a couple even, does that really materially change anything for us? Like in that period, let's just say we won one FA Cup and one League Cup in this time that's been there. People will still be saying, yeah, it's not good enough though. Like, do you really think that solves all your problems? You haven't won the league still. You haven't done anything in the Champions League. It just kind of carries on. Whereas the only way that you get to those prizes is by being in a financial situation that will help you to start bringing in players that are 50, 60 million, that are 150, 200, 300 grand a week, you need an extremely large amount of revenue self-generated, because we don't have an oil nation to just basically sponsor us. You can only do that by building a stadium, and if we build a stadium, you can't spend money on players at the same time. So I have a lot of sympathy for what they're trying to do, but was I pissed off at the time because I wanted to see us bring 3 or 4 players in to try and help us win a league in that one season? Absolutely. But yeah, I guess I'm still kind of net positive with them, and I think actually this has been, since Conte's come in, I think this is now what we should expect, basically. Right? We should expect to spend decent money on decent footballers and start to grow and develop and see the likes of Kulusevski's, Bentancur's, Romero's not being the exception. And actually the trend now is that we are signing like one very good player per window, which is what we need to be doing if we do want to transform this club. And that's why, to go back to my previous point, the one thing I really do agree with Conte on is he is going to need, or we as a club are going to need, a couple of transfer windows to really like upgrade the quality of the players that we've got if we do want to compete. And I think that so far they've given him largely what he wants. So we'll see how that continues over the next couple of transfer windows.
It's just one of these things, though, isn't it, mate? Like you need to. I mean, at the end of the day, it's football at this level, right? You don't build the type of stadium that we've built and try and get the type of sponsorship deals and basically build the brand that we have now if you don't want to compete, right? And I think this is the bit that I don't fully buy when people say, oh, they're just interested in making money. Well, the two things go hand in hand, right? I mean, like, it's let's look at the Glazers. Let's look at Manchester United, right? I see United fans constantly talking about how the Glazers have ruined their club and all this type of stuff, and it always feels like gymnastics to me, right? It feels like from the outside, you can see Manchester United ploughing so much money. Like this, Anthony Martinez and Casemiro this summer for close to £300 million, right? Like each player was almost about 100 mil each. I believe, let's say 80 million per player, right? So about 250 mil they've spent in a window. And I'm sure I can't remember, but I'm sure they've bought other players as well around that. They're still not going to win the league this year. Let's be honest. They're not going to win the league for another probably 10 years, you wouldn't imagine. Like maybe they'll get it once in that time. But their fans aren't happy with that. It turns to like these, there's always these other reasons. Oh, it's because they put a Rick and Morty poster up outside the stadium, or all this type of shit. I just ultimately, like, fans, we want to win stuff, right? And people aren't going to be happy unless, generally speaking, unless we do win things. When we compromise parts of our identity, when we look at somebody like Conte, we think, well, he doesn't play the Tottenham way, the football that we've always known. And that's kind of, it has sort of become a bit of a fallacy for the past few years. We sort of say, well, what's the Tottenham way ever got on us? And all of this type of stuff. I would still say, well, it still won as a double, didn't it? And won as a couple of UEFA Cups and a load of FA Cups and stuff like that. So there is form there, but modern football is changing, right? It is different. You look at kind of Guardiola, the type of football he plays. It's not exactly swashbuckling. It's ruthlessly effective, but it's not the most exciting football by any means. Liverpool are probably the best footballing team I've seen in 10, 15 years, and they only managed to get one league title. After all that, after how brilliantly they played, they got one league title out the end of it. And they lost that to Manchester City. It's pertinent we talk about this because we've got Newcastle coming up this weekend, and they're going to be like City in less than 10 years. They're going to be another team like that, and it's sort of it begins to really beg the question, like, where do we as football fans, and not just Tottenham fans, football fans, outside of those who support teams like Manchester City and Newcastle, where do we bring our, like, where do you derive joy from? You look at SPL stadiums, a lot of those are still packed out. Big teams like Hearts, big teams like Hibs, stuff like that, they still kind of get full houses. They haven't won the fucking league for donkey's years, none of them. But they're still out there enjoying themselves. And it just seems like it's so miserable in the Premier League at the moment. People are not taking well, even though for the majority of the Premier League, Manchester United were winning it. It feels different now with City, right? They feel almost invincible. And I don't even think their fans are that happy really anymore. Would you honestly be that happy if we were that, John? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. The thing is, they've just become they've sort of become a bit like what United had, where they've just become so used to it that it's a mild inconvenience if they don't win one of the 4 trophies available each season. But when they do win it, it's just like, oh, good. Like, that's par now for them is to win the League Cup, probably the FA Cup, and the League. That's par now, which is mental when you think about it. I mean, look at the League Cup. They've monopolised the most meaningless trophy out of all the trophies that are possible. So even the one that people used to go, well, that's the one we could win to kind of kick us up and get us going, they just win it for a laugh. So their fans don't give a shit about it, but they just win it anyway. They just suck it into their atmosphere and just win it. So even winning the League Cup is now sort of very distant for most teams because they can't compete with a City. Even if they get all the way to the final and then they play City, they're going to put their strongest team out and smash you anyway. So that's become like less like plausible for teams to win. And City just dominate everything. The one thing that they don't win seemingly is the one thing that their fans don't give a shit about anyway, which is the Champions League for this weird reason that I don't really understand, something to do with Champions League music and flags or something. But they don't have this desire and desperation like, you know, United and Liverpool have for obvious like historical reasons, or Chelsea had because they wanted to be that club to do it. The City just don't seem to care as much about that. And I know the hierarchy do, but the fans I'm talking about. So it's a very weird situation that we live in, and I do think that football has changed so much. Where when United won it, like most of the time each season, it felt like it meant a lot to them, the players, and to their club. Like it felt important, like they were chipping away at Liverpool, and obviously then they overtook them in terms of total league. So it meant something, and you know, even every summer, it wasn't like they were spending like mega bucks or wages were in line with other big clubs in Europe, which is why those big players were spread around the sort of Real Madrids and the AC Milans. And you know, you look at the AC Milan team of the era when Man United were amazing. They had an amazing team as well, and there were amazing teams kind of dotted around, or amazing players dotted around. It seems like now they're just sort of sucked to the Premier League, and the best ones of the best crop get sucked to Man City. So it just
Bellingham's going to be there in a couple of years, right?
Of course he is. Because I looked at Bellingham when he went to Dortmund, I thought, wow, that'd be a great signing for Spurs. And I just laughed at myself thinking, we have got zero chance of getting him because City will go, oh, well, who's it time to upgrade now? We'll just go and give him the wages that he wants. And again, like now we live in a world where they don't even have to spend money on players. Haaland went there for next to fuck all, but they can just pay him wages that are just astronomical and they can just get him in. So I think I said in the last pod, the reason that I'm kind of less big on Conte's style of football and this idea that playing that way will equal winning is that I don't think it does anymore. Not in the Premier League, because I sort of think like it's so dominated by City. Teams like, okay, they're having a blip now, but Liverpool were ahead of us. Chelsea, again, they're basically stable again and they're going to have loads of money and they've already got good players there. They're financially in better positions than we are to be able to really like capitalise. They've got that kind of stronger base to go from. So what are we doing it all for? Like, what are we actually doing it all for? Because, you know, to your point, a lot of teams in the SPL, they know they're never going to win the league, but they go week in, week out and they love it. I've got friends who support championship clubs. It's the 5th most watched league in the world, or in Europe anyway, in terms of like people that go to games, right? Which is mental when you think about it. Like mid-table championship teams, they sell out most weeks at home. It's amazing. Why are they doing it? Because they love the game and there's still the hope and the dreams and the enjoyment of watching football. If you're not enjoying watching football and the only reason that you're prepared to do that is because you're going to win something and then you don't, what is the point? And I know this. We've gone from the beginning going, oh, maybe people thought we were negative, and now I'm basically coming up with nihilism as my answer. But what is the point? That's the thing that I think is the most bleak. It
is weird, isn't it? Because I get it. Like, all right, it might not be for you or I, Conte's style, and I think it. You know, it does seem to be a very polarising issue, 50-50 right down the middle. And I often see people talk about like the Conte situation as in like fans are entitled. I do think sometimes people misread it. It's always kind of billed as like, oh yeah, Spurs were really good before Conte came in, but now Spurs fans feel so entitled to win something that they want to get rid of a serial winner and blah blah. It's like, don't get me wrong, this ain't about like I think we're going to stand a better chance of winning something without Antonio Conte. Yeah. I think it's more that I'm starting to reconcile the fact that, just winning stuff really in England now, as much as it's kind of turned into war a trophy, let's all have a laugh at Spurs, it ain't that simple anymore. Like, you said it yourself, like we City can just show up. We were in the League Cup final with City a couple of years ago. They can just show up and just be like, that's another trophy for us. We just have to play in this game, and that's that. And I do think we were touching on it at the top. I do still think Spurs were in that unique position whereby we are definitely the best of the rest, right? If you consider, still that kind of that sort of Sky big fight, City are only there. I don't think City really have the stature of a club even bigger than us. City are just, they're weird. They're like a placeholder now. They're just kind of a thing. I don't even think it's Manchester City anymore. That's the weird thing. It's almost like just, like in Silence of the Lambs when Buffalo Bill wears the fucking policeman's face. It's kind of, it's Hannibal Lecter, wasn't it? Not Buffalo Bill. Yeah, Hannibal when he wears the policeman's face. And it just feels like, yeah, the City have just, their skin has been wrapped around this thing, this entity that just wants to kind of take over sport, take over football, if you like. So they're there. But if you think about like Liverpool, United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Spurs, like, yeah, we don't have the Premier League success, so we are still outside of that bracket. Like we've finished above Liverpool, Arsenal, whatever, for a few years here and there and stuff like that. But still, I think if we're all being honest, we know in the Premier League era, like we're still slightly behind that lot. We're trying to catch up with them, but I always feel that we sort of represent this team to teams like that they know we're kind of on their tails. And for them, it's always a bit of a yardstick of, can we still beat top? Like, where are we? Like a team like Manchester United, they're looking at this, like where they are now, thinking, well, we're not the sort of the bombastic Fergie era Manchester United that's going up for the title, but we can still have Tottenham on our own patch, right? Come on, it's come lads, it's Tottenham type shit. And so they'll always turn up, and like you were saying about Casemiro sort of celebrating like he's just won the World Cup with Brazil, sort of falling down to his knees and all that type of stuff. I feel like we are sort of pushing water up a hill in that respect. And then so like when I see, like, I understand, like, the thing is, I try not to take it too personally. I do still think there's a kind of a thread with Antonio Conte where he does act like he's doing us a bit of a favour. Like he acts like he's, and the lads that do the Athletic pod, The View from the Lane, I like listening to them because they're not, Jack Pitt-Brett isn't a Spurs fan. I can't remember what his name is. They've got a new lad on there at the moment who's like a Wolves fan. But they normally have Charlie Eccleshare on there as well, who's not a Spurs fan. And I always quite using them as a bit of a yardstick and wondering, like, what are the points where I'm just getting emotional about an issue because I'm a Spurs fan? I don't know. I just think they provide quite a good yardstick. And they were saying that, like, for example, after this United press conference, they seemed quite concerned by a lot of what Conte was saying. They felt that he was kind of reverting again back to a bit of his last season. I'm a bit above all this. What am I really supposed to do with these tools that are made available to me? It's like, I don't really get how much longer he keeps being able to say that stuff. But I mean, whatever. That's a different matter entirely. I mean, I think the thing is like, I understand he wants to win stuff. We've hired a guy that is a winner, right? He should be probably at a Real Madrid or somebody like that, pissing the league and making a good fist of it in the Champions League, even though he's never made a good fist of it in the Champions League. But, that's a different issue entirely. So we're still in this place now with everything that we're saying about money, about the landscape of football now, is what is it like? Is it maybe it's enough for some people? Maybe I'm pissing on it for other people. Maybe the hope of us maybe winning something under Antonio Conte, even if the football isn't to everyone's liking, is enough for them. Even, you know, to be able to shut out the noise of Manchester City, of Chelsea, of Man United, of Liverpool, all the rest of it, and just think, look, we've got this guy in charge, and if we just get a couple of signings right, maybe we can just, on that 1 year, sneak in and win the Premier League. And I get that. Maybe it's more a reflection on me. Maybe I am too jaded when I talk about Manchester City or Newcastle, and I see kind of like just the amount of money there that they can just spend so easy. You know, I've already seen kind of like people saying, "Oh, Newcastle, you know, they haven't bought Haaland, they haven't gone for Mbappe, so all this kind of hyperbole is ridiculous." It's so disingenuous, man. Like, the club has spent what have they spent already? About £250 million, I think, since the Saudis have come in, and that's just going to keep happening every single year. You can guarantee they will sign 4 or 5 30 to £50 million players, and just keep on doing that. Whereas, you know, we can't do that. And so I guess I revert back to this place of thinking like, well, when have I had fun as a Tottenham fan? Yol, Redknapp, Pochettino. And by all means, these were all times when we played nice football, and we still kind of had that hope of, I felt, still had that hope of winning something, or at least kind of achieving something. Yol was a bit further back, but with Yol it was maybe qualifying for the Champions League, which was a bigger deal for Tottenham then. Under Redknapp and under Pochettino, it probably was closer to like, can we sneak a league title, or, you know, finish in the kind of top 2, or at least push for the title. And I don't think we have to compromise as much as the conversation is made out of the moment. But this is sort of old ground, right? We've covered this stuff. I'm not saying that I want Antonio Conte gone. I'm just talking about the fact that I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be enjoying about it right now. The hope that we might win something, but he keeps coming on the mic and telling everybody that we're not going to. He laughed when it was spoken about as being title contenders. Do you know what I mean? No.
But then let's let's try and bring some positivity to top and tail. Top and tail. Let's assume that what Conte's saying isn't to protect himself or his own vanity. That it's true. In other words, what he's saying is like, right now us winning the league is not possible, and him laughing I don't think is like a disrespectful thing. It's more of a case of like, have some realism. In the same way as you and I going, it's impossible. Look at City, look at the money they spend, blah, blah, right? If someone asked you, you might laugh as part of an exchange of that conversation, right? Just based on what the ceiling is of the league. But he is also, by his own admission and by, you know, his record, a winner, someone who wants to win. He doesn't take a job going, right, I'm going to just try and finish 4th. But he has also said very clearly, I need a couple of windows here. I need to be backed. I need to be given the players that will get me there. Now, he hasn't got the players that he needs, and we all know that, right? No one's looking at this squad going, this squad is ready to win the league. We've got every player you could need in every position twice, and we're ready to go. No one, like, I'm pretty confident saying 100% of Spurs fans, when asked, would say this squad needs work, right? So let's assume that he's correct, and it's going to take him a couple of transfer windows. That means the objective of this year is not to win the league, it's to finish top 4. And based on the points that we're getting, we'll do that. So the success, or like the measure of success this year, shouldn't be whether we win the league or not, or whether we play well. Based on his kind of, you know, remit, is to consolidate top 4, go into like the transfer window and get the players we need to build towards making a title challenge. So actually, like, if I take a step back and I take off my week to week, are we playing well, what are the results, and look at the bigger picture, he came in, took a side that was in pretty bad state, got us playing a certain way, and got us into the top 4, pretty much against the odds, right? We were pretty far off, and actually, look at, you know, he did a fucking great job doing that. Went into the summer, identified some areas that needed strengthening, and all right, all those signings that we got in the summer haven't exactly like lit the world up, but they are improvement. They are better than what we had, and it is a step in the right direction. Are there still gaps? Yeah, massively. Like there's loads of areas that we could still improve. Right, we don't have a creative midfielder. I think our fullbacks are pretty poor and they need to be turned over. But we've signed Destiny Udogie, who's ripping it up in Italy. He's probably going to come next year. And then we've still got Spence, who is going to have a season of learning under Conte. If suddenly next year we've got Destiny on one side and Spence, two young, rapid attacking fullbacks, it almost like could transform what we're trying to do from our sort of wing backs. You sign a couple of creative midfielders that can give you a bit of a change in midfield when you're 3-5-2 that we don't have. Upgrade a centre back option so that if Dyer's not on it, you can rotate someone who we don't lose there. Bring in another replacement for Kulusevski, so when he's not playing, you've got another attacking threat. Suddenly, you're going, okay, fine, I'm on board now, because this isn't their swashbuckling attacking football, but there is progress in the right direction. And so I am constantly trying to remind myself, while it's so easy to pick at Conte of the way that he plays and the things that we do, like ENIC and the general direction over a longer period of time, if you give him that longer period of time and he doesn't do it, fair enough. But right now, the direction of travel is net good. And I think we all, myself included, have to just give him the time to do it. We might not like the way it's happening, but so far, like, the overall net results are positive, and that's why I'm will remain critical of the way we play, because I don't like it, but I will back him to be successful as long as he is doing what he said he's going to do over the course of seasons and multiple seasons, as long as he's our manager.
See, because you know what, it is important to have this context as well about backing him, because I think when all is said and done, I do still back it. I don't want him to go anywhere. I think about it like, there's a lot of this talk about Pochettino turning down Villa and stuff at the moment. I wouldn't want Pochettino to come back at this sort of point. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't want him to inherit kind of a maelstrom after somebody like Conte's walked out or whatever. Like, if I'm being brutally honest, right, I think the best time for Pochettino to come back will be when Harry Kane has left the club, basically, and he can rebuild the team properly afresh. That's kind of when I'd like to see him back and give us a bit of a lift after that as well. After Kane and Son probably are gone. But I mean, because this is the question, right? If you're not kind of bought into Conte, if you don't want Conte there, I guess many people would say Pochettino, but who else? Potter's gone to Chelsea now. Nagelsmann isn't looking quite the kind of visionary that he once was. Bayern are sort of really struggling at the moment, or have been at least. I'm not really that in touch with the Bundesliga. I just knew that they had a pretty bad start to the season. They were looking to biff him off potentially. And I do wonder, John, mate, do you think this plays into it at all? The stuff with Conte's contract. Do you think it's harder to buy into a guy who there's still so much uncertainty around?
Yeah, and I wonder how much of it is intentional on his side to make sure, knowing Daniel Levy and knowing ENIC and the way that they have treated other managers, where they've sort of seemingly promised them stuff and then kind of gone back on their word a little bit and kind of restricted it. Is he playing his cards the best way he knows, which is, I've got to give the threat of I could leave if you don't give me what I want, because I need to make sure I can get what I want. And so in some ways he's acting on the best interests of the fans, really, which is like, I need to get players in to make sure we win stuff, which is what the fans want. So I think it's easy to go, he needs to be a better, club man. And Pochettino was a good club man, and we didn't have a sign-in a transfer window because
for fucking 3 windows, wasn't it?
Being the good statesman of the club, and we know how that ended. So it doesn't pay always to be a statesman of the club and to be a good club man. You can still get sacked if results don't go your way. And so he's got to protect his interest, which is on the pitch and getting things done. So I'm not mega concerned with that. I do feel, though, that there's a happy medium where he could be more in tune with the fans and be more kind of like, say that, basically, saying, look, I want to be here for the fans, I want to do these things, but the club need to promise me X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, I'll have to leave. I don't want to leave this great club and these great fans, but X, Y, and Z. But he doesn't. He just goes direct to the point of what seems to be saying, like, this is beneath me, so give me what I want, otherwise I can't do it. And that I think sort of sticks in our throat a little bit. So I feel like he could do more for us to warm to him, because, the fans, I think, like, by and large, are warming to him, and we sing his name in the stadium, and we want to be invested. I want to be invested. And I heard someone saying, this was before the United game, like, I think it was Flav on the Fighting Cock asking Thelonious, like, do you love him as much as you love Poch? And T was getting towards that. I'm miles away from that, if I'm honest, and not because of the football, just because I don't feel the connection yet that I did with Pochettino to, at the core, what it means to be a fan. And I don't think that's because I don't think I'll never not feel that. I feel that there's potential for that to happen, but I think he needs to separate his business side with the club and the football relationship and the sort of football nostalgia, if you like, between us and him. And so I think he needs to be a bit smarter about that, because, yeah, if you need to force Levy's hand to get more money, fine, but don't do it at the expense of making us feel like you think the club is beneath you, because that is not a good way to garner support.
It's a funny one, isn't it? And I agree with you on that. I hadn't really ever thought of it that way, or really considered it, the idea of him kind of just ensuring that he manages to keep getting money from the club. Because I think one thing I will definitely say, that I'm not above, when I say that we're not Manchester City, so you can't expect the sort of same level of spending, it doesn't mean that we still can't be spending. We still are one of the richest clubs in the world. We have probably the highest ticket prices in the world. Like, I can genuinely barely afford to go to Spurs anymore. It's so expensive. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's pretty mad. So there is no real excuse for us not to have that investment. I think after the few years of Pochettino and feeling like we weren't putting much in, I'm still sort of in this weird zone where I feel kind of grateful when we do sign players. Do you know what I mean? Which it should really be that way, but sometimes I do feel that way. Let's talk briefly about the Newcastle game, John.
Yeah.
It feels weirdly, I mean, these sort of terms, they're quite charged, aren't they? But it does feel kind of must win from a sort of morale perspective. And yeah, if let's forget about where Arsenal are in the table. Let's forget about kind of trying to win the league or catch up or whatever. Just in terms of like the whole feeling around the club and the sort of, I guess, the sense of what Newcastle are and them kind of trying to come in on our territory a bit. We need to sort of send out a bit of a message to teams like that at the moment, right? Don't we? Sort of tell them to sort of wait their place in the queue, in a way, for me.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think we probably will, because I think that United game was an abomination. It was terrible, but I do also think that a lot of players played badly, right? It wasn't just a system versus system, and they were much better than us. We played our best, they played their best, and they beat us. We were shit, and players were shit. So forget like Conte's element. He can't make a player control a ball better in that moment, or pass 5 yards, or make a mad decision. It's the broader system, and it has its issues, but players also played badly. And I don't think you'll get that many players all playing badly in the same game again. Our home record's been really good under Conte, and this season it's been really good. And I expect us to play well and get back to better form and do well. And I think it is important because, like I said before, if we reset our expectations of like, oh, maybe we could win something under Conte immediately, and just think top four, this is a game we have to win. So yeah, I think it is important just for, forget about them and forget about the sort of wider context around why it's important to beat them. I think just for the season, like, we need to get back on track pretty quickly, and the games are going to be stacking up as well. I don't want this Conte's no good at 2 games a week narrative to start seeping in already, because that will, again, not help us from a psychological point of view either.
Is there anyone you want to see starting, like, specifically in this game? Because I'd like to see Sessegnon come back out. I think Perisic has had a bit of a mare the past couple of games.
Yeah. It's funny though, isn't it? Because like, if this was like FIFA, and I was like forced to play a certain way, and now it's like you can do whatever you want, change whatever you want, I would completely overhaul most of the squad. I actually like 3-5-2 as the system, but to be honest, when you were talking about Kulusevski earlier, and I was thinking the main reason that we struggle is because we don't have a Kulusevski replacement, but we do have a player who is sort of similar but just doesn't play, which is Bryan Hill, and he never gets to play. And I sort of think, like, is it better to change to 3-5-2 because we don't have Kulusevski, or keep with the same system and just change to a player who's not as good as Kulusevski but is broadly the similar profile, so you keep some consistency there? And so part of me kind of feels like it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to give him some minutes and just see what he does in that position. You can always change to go back to 3-5-2 quite easily and just take him off if it's not working. I'd also like, again, I would like to see Sessegnon, and I'd like to see Spence, because I'd like to see us have some pace on the pitch, because I think one of the things that we did struggle with against not just United but in other games is we're good on the counter because we have Son, who's rapid, and Kulusevski, who's a great ball carrier, and Kane, who's a great passer. When you take like Kulusevski out of that and Kane's dropping deep to pick up the ball, you only have one runner really who's got any pace. And so I do feel like with Sessegnon and Spence as the fullbacks, if you do play 3-5-2 and they're going to be much higher up the pitch, that is much more dangerous for us, because then suddenly you have maybe both fullbacks and Son running in behind. It's just more threat. So, yeah, and I'd also like to bring Longley in, because I feel like Davis has been decent, I think, under Conte, but I feel like he's just a better progressor of the ball. I basically want to see more talented footballers on the pitch at the same time. Because the players we've got are quite workmanlike and either lack pace or lack technicality. Like Royale is a specimen. He can get up and down, he's strong and all the rest of it, but he's technically pretty poor. Perisic is like technically very good, but his physicality is not there anymore. He's got a little bit older, he's a bit slow, and he's pretty bad going the other way defensively. So yeah, I'd bring in Sessegnon, I'd bring in Spence, I'd bring in like Hill potentially if we're going to play, the three up front.
It's funny, that one, Hill, man. He's so. I've loved his little cameos, right? I think I think he's really shown he's really up for it. I would just worry about his physicality in the Premier League. That's the thing, but you're up for rolling the dice.
But there's only one way that he gets better at that, is to play. Right? There's been loads of players who came into the Premier League and they got barged off the ball. I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo's a prime example.
Yeah.
He used to get pushed off the ball, go down. Everyone's like, oh, he's not got it. He hasn't got the physicality of the Premier League. It's like, but the only way that these players get used to it and get better is to play in it and to get used to it and to build up strength. And we've seen it with Sessegnon over the summer. Like he's built himself up because he's now understands what the expectations are. There's a load of diminutive players who play in the Premier League. Now, I'm not comparing Brian Hill to Cristiano Ronaldo or to these players I'm about to name, but like Bernardo Silva, David Silva, these players are small. They're not strong, but they built themselves up to a point where they could use their body as best they can to get the most out of playing in a physical league. I just feel like, why do we sign players if they never play for us? Genuinely. And if we're flying and Kulusevski's fit, of course he doesn't play, but right now he's not fit. And it's a player we spent a decent amount of money on, who's played a decent amount of football in a decent league in Spain. It's not nobody. It's not just some random we've plucked out of the academy. Like, he gets paid tens of thousands of pounds to play football. How bad can he be in comparison to what we're seeing? Like, I'm just a firm believer in younger players who need to prove something, being given more of a chance. I understand, again, Conte is very much like, I need experienced warrior men, which again is Mourinho's mantra, right? And part of the reason his decline started happening, because he was like, there aren't any of these warrior men players left. It's like, well, there aren't, but there are shitloads of talented youngsters who are really technically gifted. So why can't we just see them? All of those changes, by the way, I don't expect to see. We might see Sessegnon and we might see Perisic as part of the front three if he goes back to the sort of 3-4-3 formation. But we're not going to see Spence start for a long time, I don't think, which is very annoying.
Do you think how bad Basuma was against United vindicates Conte at all? Because he has sort of made the point of saying of Basuma and of Spence that they're not ready, right?
Yeah, but again, I think it's like, in the same way as one game, someone playing brilliantly doesn't mean that, right, that's it, they've got to start every game and they're the best player we've ever had. One bad game when we haven't, as a team, we haven't played that system very often. We've changed to it in game. It doesn't necessarily prove that he's not good enough and not ready, right? Everybody played badly in that system. He came on the other day and played brilliantly in that system. So I don't know. I think we need to basically have a run of games playing it with him playing to really decide whether or not he's ready or not. I think just like throwing players into games and going, oh, there you go, they didn't play well, so therefore they're not ready, is as useful as they come on and did brilliant. It's like, right, they've got to start every game forever now. I don't know. I think we just need more time to see what these players are going to actually do long term.
Just finally, mate, in closing, because Jurgen Klopp recently has sort of been complaining about Newcastle, and he's been getting pelters for that. Wow, you signed Alisson and you signed Van Dijk and stuff, but to me, it felt sort of tribal, churlish stuff. I thought he was making a pretty reasonable point, and I can imagine being a manager of a club like Liverpool. I think Klopp knows his best days at Liverpool are probably behind him now. That it's sort of downhill from here. Basically, Newcastle, just fuck off.
Yeah, just
Newcastle. Do you hate it? I can't stand it. It's irritating.
I hate Newcastle and I hate City, and no one hates City because City stop their respective rivals from winning stuff because no one really gives a shit about City in that way. I think we all need to start hating City for what they are. They are a perpetual evil that is ruining football. It's ruining enjoyment of football. That is ruining the competition of football. And they do it under the guise of being neutral because no one really hates them. Even United, their biggest rival is Liverpool. And Liverpool's biggest rival is Man United. So those two, as long as one of those doesn't win the league, we hate Arsenal. So therefore we're happy if City win the league, so Arsenal can't win the league. It's just this weird, they've just got this weird cloak of being neutral as a hate figure. We should all football fans should despise City, loathe them. And I loathe them and I despise them. And I'm going to start actively wanting them to lose. Maybe not this season with Arsenal. But after that, I'm fully on board with just everyone should just hate City. They should hate them.
Unless Arsenal are good next year as well.
Exactly. But as long as City are doing what they're doing and getting a free ride from everyone, then football is just over as a competition for what we love it for. So fuck City, fuck Newcastle, fuck PSG and all these state-sponsored football monopoly money mugs. Fuck them all.